Hello and welcome to The Wire. I am Jahnavi and with me today I have Maja Daruwala, who is the Chief Editor of the India Justice Report. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
Just to start with, now this is the fourth edition of the report which looks at justice delivery systems across states in India. Could you talk a little bit about what exactly you are looking at? Do you have a ranking system for states? So what goes into that ranking system? What are the parameters?
The thing unique about the India Justice Report is, first of all, that it comes out periodically every 2 years. The second thing is that it collates a lot of information about police, prisons, legal aid, judiciary, brings it all together. Third thing is that it's based only on the figures and the facts and the information that we get from government. So it's not any imaginary thing, it's the statistics that are given out by the government. But the most unique thing that we have done right from the beginning is to rank the states. And what we rank of these 4 pillars is the human resources, the infrastructure, the workload, the budgets, and the diversity. So by the time you come to the 4th report, you're seeing patterns, you're seeing trends, and that would be how I would describe the India Justice Report. It's essentially meant for a reference and a bringing together for the policymakers. For the media, it's a quick reckoner for much more, I should say, fact-based or statistical-based, data-based journalism. And for civil society, active citizens, etc., it's to get to know why sometimes the justice system does not respond in the way that the citizens of this country want it to respond.
Could you tell me a little bit about this year's report and some of your key findings from it? And also perhaps you mentioned these patterns that have emerged. What are the big patterns that you see?
Well, we've looked at so many things. The indicator numbers are over 100. But the things that have emerged as perennial problems are smaller budgets that are not perhaps adequate, and perhaps in a country which is a developing country, then it's always going to be not enough. That's one thing. The other thing is the levels of vacancy, then the levels of inclusion.
And these are across the sectors you mentioned?
These are across the sectors. And where there is one thing that is adequate, then perhaps the infrastructure is not adequate.
Right.
Like if you have a full cohort of judges, you're not going to have enough court halls. So those are the kinds of things that we see and which need to be correlated in order to make policy which will help eventually. What is it about? The country is not about merely having a set of laws, but actually being able to deliver justice. Yeah. And so what are the parameters you need to satisfy before you can deliver justice to a population where the demand for dispute resolution, whether it is in the civil side or the criminal side, is satisfied?
In terms of the states that have done well, I think Karnataka is ranked first in this year's report. What have they got right?
I think what they've got right is they've increased budgets. They've reduced the vacancies. They've been more inclusive in terms of caste and gender. They've created more infrastructure. Supposing, for instance, in one state, they've improved forensics tremendously. Then we are touching on that for the first time because forensics has become a very important part of policing. At the same time, if they've also increased, say, CCTVs in police stations as they are required to do. So all of that comes together. But the general trend has been that the southern states, and this time a surprise inclusion of Chhattisgarh, have always done better. And then the states that of the 7 or 6 states that are at the bottom consistently remain at the bottom. Whereas the middle states, we look at 18 of them, 18 states altogether, seem to suffer from legacy problems which they are slow to change. So that's how the sort of general trend that we are seeing.
Your report has some rather stark statistics when it comes to inclusion, particularly in the judiciary of the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. Could you talk a little bit about what is lacking in that sphere?
Certainly. I don't want to sort of make your eyes glaze over with statistics, but suffice it to say that when it comes to caste, there are quotas. There are legal quotas. Where it comes to women, it's a policy matter, it's not a quota thing. And the policy generally is 33%. It's sort of been thrown out into the atmosphere, and that's where it's stuck. Some states have more, recruit better and have higher sanction strength or quotas, and some states have lower ones. Getting back to caste, you see both in women and in caste that there are much more inclusion at the lower ranks. Right. Whether it's police, whether it's judiciary, these are at the lower ranks you get large percentages of inclusion. As soon as you go into the High Court or the officer cadre, then it drops considerably. So it does indicate a certain kind of culture that exists. But where there is tremendous overrepresentation of caste, poor people, though caste is not enumerated there, dare I say that when it comes to the prison population, right, you are getting 90% who are extremely poor come from castes that are historically disadvantaged. So the overrepresentation there is disproportionate.
Speaking of prisons, I think perhaps for the first time the Supreme Court is quite seriously and actively hearing a case on reforms required in prisons. From your research, what is the situation of Indian prisons and what really needs work? So
yes, there is a long-standing case, I think it's over 10 years now, called 1382 inhuman, it's called Inhuman Conditions. That's the short form, that's how we all know it. And it's had a sort of mandate to watch over prisons and monitor them. So what we are finding is that because of this monitoring perhaps, the conditions in prisons, including from the Supreme Court, including from certain high courts, is being watched. But nevertheless, in 10 years, the overcrowding has increased. This year it's about 131%, and that's a national figure. But there are over 80 prisons in the country where the overcrowding is 200%. There is a report to the Supreme Court that says that in over 30% of prisons there is no sleeping space. Can you imagine it? Again, these same prisons are very short-handed. So security staff, staff that are supposed to look after mental health, correctional staff, are all very, very low. Some states have not even sanctioned psychologists. For the whole country, there are about 27 psychologists across all these prisons. And so the notion that the possibility that there might be reform, rehabilitation is a non-starter. And then again, you think about reform and rehabilitation in terms of convict prisoners. But most of the prison, some 75% and over, is under trials. And there we are finding the pattern is that more under trials are spending more time in prison. So you've got people who are spending more than 3 years. A large percentage of people are spending more than 3 years. So what does that say about the delivery of justice? Yeah. Having said that, you've got 15 judges per million population, which are being asked to handle, you've heard the horrible eye-catching figure of 5 crore, but it works out to near above 2,000 cases per judge at the lower court and 5,000 to 7,000 cases in the high court. So there is you wouldn't blame judges for being absolutely exhausted. So the prisons are suffocated and the judges are exhausted. And unless each judge sits down and clears 100% of all the cases that come in every year, it's only going to increase. So these are dangers that are discernible at today's date. Now, what you want to do about it in 10 years' time, in 5 years' time, when things are puttering along without any sort of radical change.
Yeah.
That is where the justice system is standing.
Linked to what you said about the overrepresentation of marginalized communities in prisons is very much the question of legal aid. So I was hoping you could talk to us, because it's not something we hear a lot about in the news or otherwise. How well is the legal aid system in India functioning, and what does it need?
There is a legal aid system. It is run through the judiciary. There are nodes in every state. The question is the mandate. It has a large mandate. Actually, if you look at it, almost 80% of the population could avail of legal aid because it's open to women, it's open to the poor, etc. 2 mandates that I would like to put before you. One is representation of people who are in difficulties with the law. So, legal representation. Now, that can be appearances in court, or it can be counseling, and it can be a kind of dispute resolution also, which is also there in Lok Adalats. And on the other hand, there is the whole mandate of legal awareness. There are 1.4 billion people in this country, and about 18 to 20 lakh people pass through jails during the year. The present policy appears to be to focus sharply on representation and targeted communities and jail clinics, and to use money usefully there. But then there is the whole issue of legal awareness. How do you get the whole issue of rights and duties, and how much your rights are and how they are limited by other people's rights, equality, and all of the chapter 3 parts of Constitution as it relates to human rights, to convey to a population that really whose living reality is that of caste, status, poverty, and inequality. So how do you tell them that justice is available to them? For that you need mechanisms, and those mechanisms we are seeing diminish. PLVs, which are paralegal volunteers, are being cut down every year. We are seeing that. So one resource is being taken away from scattered communities. The other resource is the easily available legal aid center or legal advice center in your village or in your toli or in a group of villages. Now that has grown from or diminished from one which used to be for about 40-45 villages. Now it's gone up to one for 100 and some villages, maybe over 150 villages. So in fact, you're taking away localized resources, legal resources for people in the formal sector. There are other legal resources, but why would we want one set of the population to have all the recourse to some kinds of state uh, uh, assistance, but then leave others without recourse.
Okay, thank you so much for walking us through the main points of the report. There are so many crucial details in it, and I encourage all our viewers to head on to our website where we have detailed coverage on the report. Thank you so much for joining me.